Offspring, the eugenist movement of the past century, used to propagate that one should not want to be responsible for a disabled child. It would cost the society too much money. Even in the classical era, philosophers would negotiate these issues. Plato already stated that it should always be politics that decide upon the lives of its citizens, not the medical field. At the same time, he believed that medicine was reserved only for those who would still be able to fulfill their social role after receiving treatment. These ideas are nowadays dismissed as unethical. And yet, if we observe the subtle ways that our society deals with disease and illness, we can see that the mindset of the past has changed little. The world is obsessed with optimization of processes when it comes to cost and benefits. Modern eugenism happens nowadays at an unparalleled scale. In many countries, prenatal screening is standardized to detect potential defects. When a fetus has a demonstrable defect, also known as a congenital disorder, the parents are given the option to terminate the pregnancy. This way, an unborn life is put on a scale. Their value is determined by its potential profit to society, and thus conditions that could harm their potential, in terms of economical value or costs, are deemed unwanted and eradicated, suppressed, and medically treated. Admittedly, that is not something we would like to say. Rather, we regard these measures as beneficial for the unborn fetus. But how unfortunate it is then, when a crisis arises, such as the corona crisis, which quickly overtook my dystopian scenario, to put the carefully built economy on hold for just those weaker members of society that they've so carefully tried to eliminate. On the map, you can see that there's an overlap between countries that have the option to do prenatal screening and the decreasing prevalence of birth defects. The Netherlands is one of the countries where birth defects and genetic conditions are eradicated at a high pace. If we keep continuing to filter the births of children with congenital disorders, the populations with these disorders will become smaller and smaller until they completely disappear in some areas in the world. I predict that a dichotomy will arise between countries with a well-organized health system and social safety net, and a tolerance towards prenatal interventions, and countries that do not. The current corona crisis has painfully exposed our shared prejudice. Container concepts have emerged that divide society into the elderly, the weak, and the healthy majority. The elderly and the weak are expected to isolate themselves to protect the economy, and I predict that the polarization between these groups will only increase. I fear for a society where a person's personal value and social status is determined by his or her medical record and health. With my work, which is somewhat of a fictional character, I would like to cross the threshold of visibility of things that are largely invisible to the public, such as informed decision making about birth interventions, the valuation of a human life, and the disguised views of prejudice about norms and values surrounding illness, life, and death that permeate our actions and thoughts. My work will consist of animations that take place in a dystopian nearby future, where the plexiglass screens in supermarkets and the self-chosen isolation of people with a vulnerable health have been replaced by a spatial layout in living spaces. Insulation towers have emerged above the city skyline, where people with a more vulnerable health live segregated lives apart from the new healthy majority.